The colony ship Artemis shuddered violently as it pierced the atmosphere of Proxima Centauri b, trailing fire and debris across the alien sky. Commander Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair, knuckles white, as warning alarms screamed throughout the bridge. "Hull integrity at 30%, shouted Lieutenant Damian Foster, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of failing systems. "We're losing attitude control." Elena's mind raced through emergency protocols. Jettison the remaining cargo modules. Redirect all power to landing thrusters. The massive vessel groaned in protest as it plummeted toward the planet's surface. 300 colonists, the last hope of a distant Earth, lay in cryosleep chambers, unaware their carefully planned mission had become a desperate fight for survival. "Brace for impact," Elena commanded as the ship's automated voice calmly announced complete system failure. The Artemis struck the surface with catastrophic force, skidding across an expansive violet plain before coming to rest at the edge of a crystalline forest. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of ruptured coolant lines and the soft ping of cooling metal. 2 weeks after the crash, Elena stood at the edge of their makeshift settlement, watching as colonists erected shelters from salvaged materials. The planet, which they'd named Novo, was breathable but alien in every sense. Vegetation glowed with bioluminescence after sunset, and strange, low-gravity conditions made movement both easier and oddly disorienting. Dr. Olivia Tamura approached, her medical insignia still visible on her torn uniform. "Commander, we need to talk about supplies." Elena nodded grimly. "How bad?" "Critical. We've lost 60% of our medical reserves in the crash. Without the fabrication modules, we can't synthesize antibiotics or pain management compounds." Olivia's expression darkened. "And there's something else. The local microbiome, we're not compatible. Minor injuries are becoming infected with organisms our immune systems can't recognize." "Casualties?" "For so far. 12 more in serious condition." Elena surveyed their broken ship, once humanity's pinnacle of engineering, now a twisted monument to their vulnerability. "What about the agricultural dome?" Maya and her team salvaged what they could, but without proper soil nutrients. A shout from the perimeter interrupted them. Security Chief Ravi Patel was running toward them, plasma rifle drawn. "Commander. We've got movement in the crystal forest." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. "Hostile?" "Unknown. But definitely sentient." They hurried to the perimeter where colonists had gathered, weapons at the ready. At the forest's edge stood 3 figures unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Their bodies appeared to be composed of semi-transparent crystal, refracting light in hypnotic patterns. They stood motionless, observing the human settlement with what appeared to be curiosity. "Hold fire," Elena ordered, stepping forward. "First contact protocol." From another direction, a rustling sound drew their attention. Emerging from the reed-like vegetation near the water's edge came different beings, their bodies sleek and amphibious with iridescent scales that shifted color like oil on water. Their eyes were large and black, unblinking as they regarded the humans with equal fascination. "Commander," whispered Ravi, "we're surrounded." Before Elena could respond, movement from the canopy above revealed a third species, lithe, bark-skinned beings with limbs that seemed to flow like branches in the wind. Their facial features were almost human-like, yet distinctly alien, with patterns of bioluminescent markings that pulsed rhythmically. Dr. Maya Okafor, the expedition's xenobiologist, approached Elena with barely contained excitement. 3 distinct species, coexisting on one planet. "Commander, this defies everything we theorized about evolutionary competition." Elena raised her empty hands in a universal gesture of peace. One of the crystalline beings mirrored her movement, raising appendages that glimmered in the fading sunlight. "They're intelligent," Elena murmured. "And we're trespassing in their home." The tallest of the amphibious creatures moved forward, carrying what appeared to be a vessel made of unknown material. It stopped several meters away, setting the container on the ground before retreating. Olivia scanned it with her medical tricorder. It's water. But enhanced with minerals our scanners can't identify. A gift? Ravi suggested, still suspicious. Maya nodded slowly. Or a test. Commander, I believe they're evaluating whether we can recognize an offering of life-sustaining resources. Elena approached the container, aware that this moment would define humanity's first relationship with intelligent alien life. She knelt, took a ceremonial sip, and then offered it back to the beings. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, remarkably, representatives from each species approached and partook of the water in their own unique ways. As the sun set over Novo, casting the alien landscape in deep purples and blues, Elena realized their survival would depend not on conquering this world, but on forming alliances with its original inhabitants. The Artemis had failed in its mission to establish an independent human colony, but perhaps it had found something more valuable, the first bridge between species across the Gulf of Stars. 6 months after the crash landing, the human settlement had transformed from a collection of emergency shelters to a functional colony. Repurposed ship modules formed the central structures, surrounded by dwellings that increasingly incorporated native materials, crystalline supports harvested from quarries the Lumini had shown them, waterproof fibers cultivated by the Mersai, and living architecture guided by Silvani knowledge. Talia Okoro wiped sweat from her brow as she adjusted the final calibrations on her translator device. The colony's chief engineer had spent months developing a system that could interpret the complex harmonic language of the Lumini, the ultrasonic clicks of the Mersai, and the pheromone-enhanced speech of the Silvani. Frequency modulation locked, she muttered, connecting the final circuit. The device hummed to life, its display pulsing with color-coded waveforms. Now we'll really be able to talk. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Cole watched with anticipation. As the colony's lead anthropologist, he'd been documenting every aspect of their alien neighbors' cultures. This will change everything, Talia. We've been communicating through gestures and intuition, but actual language, that's how you build true understanding. Let's not celebrate yet, Talia cautioned. Theory and practice are different animals. She adjusted her earpiece and nodded to their guests. 3 representatives, one from each alien species, had been invited to witness the translator's first test. Verix, a Lumini elder whose crystalline body shimmered with internal light, Mori, a Mersai diplomat whose scales shifted between deep blue and turquoise, and Elevin, a Silvani mediator whose bark-like skin was adorned with delicate bioluminescent patterns. Talia cleared her throat. We thank you for your patience during our efforts to better communicate. This device should interpret your speech into our language, and ours into yours. The translator hummed, converting her words into the appropriate forms for each species. Verix's crystalline form vibrated, producing musical tones that the device transformed into words. Our peoples have managed much without this technology. But with it, perhaps we can share more than necessity. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. It works. Maury's throat sac expanded as she emitted a series of clicks and whistles. The translator rendered, the Mersai believe understanding flows like water, finding its way around obstacles. Your technology creates a new channel. Elevin released a cloud of subtle pheromones, accompanied by soft vocalizations. The Silvani welcome deeper roots between our communities. Though we wonder if your people truly wish to transplant yourselves permanently into our soil. The question hung in the air. Talia glanced at Marcus. They both knew the colony remained divided on this issue. Some, like Commander Vasquez, maintained that integration was their only path to survival. Others, led by Security Chief Patel, argued that they should focus on repairing their communications array to contact Earth for rescue. We're still deciding our future, Talia answered diplomatically. But improved communication helps us make better decisions together. 2 weeks later, the colony faced its first major crisis since the landing. A mysterious illness swept through the human population, causing high fever, respiratory distress, and an alarming blue discoloration of the skin. In the makeshift medical bay, Dr. Olivia Tamura worked frantically, analyzing blood samples as patients filled every available bed. Commander Vasquez assisted, her usually commanding presence diminished by exhaustion as she helped move the sick. "It's some kind of adaptive pathogen," Olivia explained, showing Elena the microscopy results. "Our immune systems have no reference for fighting it, and our remaining antibiotics are useless. At this rate, we could lose 30% of the colony within days." Elena's face hardened. "Options? Without the fabrication modules? We have none." A soft chiming sound announced a visitor. Verix, the Lumini elder, entered the medical bay, light pulsing anxiously through his crystalline form. The translator at his neck converted his vibrations. "We have observed your people's suffering. The blue wasting has affected newly arrived species before. The Lumini have a treatment, but it requires connection." Elena approached. "What kind of connection?" "Our bodies can form biological bonds, temporary symbiosis. A Lumini host can regulate the foreign body systems, teaching it to recognize and combat the pathogen." Olivia looked skeptical. "You're suggesting physically merging with our patients?" "Yes. It is not done lightly. The process creates lasting biological changes in both parties and forms a permanent empathic link. But it will save them." "I'll do it," said a voice from the doorway. Medical Officer Kai Tanaka stood there, his medical scrubs stained with the blue tinge of the disease. "I've been exposed but I'm not symptomatic yet." "Perfect test subject." "Kai, we don't know," Olivia began. "We don't have time for a committee debate," Kai interrupted. "People are dying." Elena studied him, then nodded sharply. "Your choice. But documented every step for the record." The procedure took place in a quiet room adjacent to the medical bay. Kai sat nervously on an examination table as Verix explained the process. A younger Lumini named Ixora would serve as his symbiotic partner. Ixora's crystalline form was more slender than Verix's, with swirls of amber light moving within. "You must be certain," the translator conveyed her musical vibrations. "This bond cannot be undone." Kai nodded, remembering the faces of his suffering patients. "I'm sure." The process began with Ixora placing her crystalline hands on Kai's chest and forehead. Her form began to lose solidity, becoming more fluid, enveloping Kai in a cocoon of light. He gasped as he felt her consciousness touch his, alien yet gentle, curious yet respectful. A burning sensation spread through his veins as his body absorbed trace elements from Ixora's crystalline structure. His skin briefly glowed with the same amber light that flowed through her. Then, gradually, the light receded, and Ixora reformed beside him, looking slightly more opaque than before, with subtle traces of human DNA now visible in her crystalline matrix. Kai's eyes fluttered open, now flecked with amber crystalline patterns. "I can feel," he whispered, "everything. The pathogen. I can sense it, know how to fight it." Within hours, Kai had synthesized an enzyme that, when injected into the patients, allowed their bodies to recognize and combat the illness. The colony's death toll stopped climbing. But more significant was the change in Kai himself. He moved with new awareness, occasionally emitting faint harmonic tones when emotional. And Ixora, too, had changed, adopting human gestures and expressions. As the crisis passed, the first true bridge between species had been formed, not just of technology or necessity, but of biology itself. Other sick colonists, seeing Kai's transformation, volunteered for the symbiotic treatment. Each pairing was unique, creating individuals who were neither fully human nor fully Lumini, but something new. At the month's end, a small celebration marked the colony's survival. Under the alien stars, humans danced with their Lumini partners, while Mersai shared their sacred waters, and Sylvani taught humans their growth rituals. Commander Vasquez watched it all with cautious optimism. Their colony's survival now seemed possible, but it would come with profound changes to what it meant to be human. 2 years after the crash of the Artemis, the settlement had evolved beyond recognition. No longer merely a human colony, it had become an integrated community where the boundaries between species blurred with each passing season. The central plaza, once nothing but trampled dirt surrounding the emergency beacon, now featured a harmonious blend of architectures. Crystalline spires gifted by the Lumini captured and amplified light. Living wooden structures cultivated by the Sylvani provided natural cooling, while Mersai water gardens created sustainable irrigation channels throughout the settlement. Dr. Kai Tanaka stood at the edge of the medical center, his skin subtly glimmering with amber crystalline patterns in the morning light. Since his symbiotic bonding with Ixora, he had pioneered a field of medicine that existed nowhere else in the human experience: interspecies biological compatibility. The protein sequencing is stable, he explained to a small group of human and alien observers. We've successfully adapted 15 more critical medications using combined biochemistry. Ixora stood beside him, her crystalline form now bearing distinctive human characteristics, more defined facial features and a hint of pigmentation that shifted with her emotions. When she spoke, her harmonic tones carried traces of human vocal patterns. Our biological bridge allows us to see illness through 2 perspectives simultaneously, the translator conveyed. What humans call antibiotics, we understand as harmonic restructuring. Together, we perceive the complete pattern. Among the observers, botanist Naomi Winters took careful notes. Her own transformation was visible in the fine, bark-like patterns that traced her arms, evidence of her prolonged partnership with Thorn, a Sylvani cultivator. Together, they had created hybrid plants that could sustain both human and Sylvani nutritional needs. The medical applications are promising, Naomi commented, but we're seeing similar success with agricultural integration. The photosynthetic enhancements I've developed through my connection with Thorn have increased crop yields by 60%. Not everyone watched with approval. At the edge of the gathering stood Captain Alejandro Reyes, one of the senior officers who had survived the crash. His expression remained stern as he observed the proceedings. "We're losing ourselves," he muttered to a fellow officer. "Each adaptation takes us further from what we were meant to be." Yet even as he spoke, his gaze drifted toward the water gardens where Naya, a Mersai historian, was teaching human children how to communicate through underwater vibrations. Her scales shimmered in mesmerizing patterns as she moved, graceful despite being partially out of her native environment. Later that evening, Alejandro found himself walking alone by the luminescent ponds. The moons of Novo cast triple shadows as he contemplated the latest directive from Commander Vasquez, approving the first official interspecies commitment ceremony between humans and aliens. "You avoid the water, yet you come to its edge often," came a melodic voice behind him. Alejandro turned to find Naya emerging from the pond, water cascading off her iridescent scales. The translator at her throat converted her clicks and whistles into human speech. "I'm a pilot," he responded stiffly. "I belong in the air, not underwater." Naya's head tilted curiously, her large eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Yet you were captain of a vessel that traveled the void between stars. Is that not like our deepest oceans, unknown, dangerous, beautiful?" Despite himself, Alejandro smiled. "I suppose there are similarities." "You fear the changes in your people," Naya observed, moving closer. "The Mersai elders felt the same when the first of us learned to walk on shore for extended periods. They believed we would lose our connection to the deep currents." "And did you?" "We gained new currents instead." Her scaled hand gently touched his arm. "Come. There is something I wish to show you." Against his better judgment, Alejandro followed her to the water's edge. Naya produced a small vial containing a shimmering liquid. This enzyme allows temporary adaptation. You can breathe underwater for 1 hour, she explained. No permanent changes. Just understanding. Alejandro hesitated, then took the vial. Just understanding, he repeated, and drank. The following week, the colony celebrated its first official interspecies commitment ceremony. Kai and Ixora stood beneath an arch of living wood and crystal, exchanging vows that bridged their different concepts of partnership. Naomi and Thorn joined them, their ceremony involving the planting of a tree that contained genetic material from both species, a living symbol of their union. Most surprising to many was the presence of Captain Alejandro Reyes, standing beside Naya at the edge of the gathering. While not participating in the ceremony, his attendance marked a significant shift in the colony's dynamics. The man who had once been the strongest voice for human purity now stood with his hand lightly touching the scaled fingers of his Mersai companion. As night fell and the celebration continued, Commander Elena Vasquez found a quiet moment with Dr. Marcus Cole. "Did you ever imagine this when we crashed?" she asked, watching the interspecies couples dancing to music that blended human melodies with Lumini harmonics and Sylvani rhythms. Marcus shook his head. "We came to establish a human colony. Instead, we're becoming something new entirely." Elena's eyes drifted to where several bonded pairs sat in intimate conversation. "The question is whether Earth would recognize us if they ever find us." "Perhaps the better question," Marcus suggested, "is whether that matters anymore." 5 years after the crash of the Artemis, a crowd gathered in the colony's central plaza. The occasion was momentous, the naming ceremony for the first generation of hybrid children. Aurora, daughter of Kai and Ixora, stood at the center of attention. At 3 years old, she embodied a perfect blend of human and Lumini characteristics. Her skin contained crystalline patterns that glowed with her emotions, while her clearly human eyes watched the proceedings with intelligent curiosity. Beside her stood Leaf, son of Naomi and Thorn, whose skin bore the texture of fine bark with faint photosynthetic properties. When he laughed, small flowers briefly bloomed across his shoulders, a phenomenon that delighted both human and Sylvani observers. Near the water's edge, Alejandro Reyes, now fully committed to his relationship with Naya, cradled their daughter Marina. Born with subtle scales along her spine and webbed fingers, she could breathe both air and water, shifting between environments with ease. Commander Elena Vasquez presided over the ceremony, her once black hair now streaked with silver. "Today we celebrate not just new life, but new possibility," she announced. "These children represent the future of our community, neither human nor alien, but a harmony of both." As the ceremony proceeded, Dr. Marcus Cole documented everything with meticulous care. His anthropological records had become the colony's most important historical document, the chronicle of humanity's first true integration with alien species. Not everyone celebrated. At the edge of the settlement, a group led by Security Chief Ravi Patel had constructed separate dwellings. This heritage enclave housed colonists committed to maintaining pure human bloodlines and traditions. While not hostile, they remained apart, determined to preserve what they considered the true mission of the Artemis. "They're planning to leave," Olivia Tamura informed Elena after the ceremony. "Ravi has been reconstructing one of the auxiliary craft. They want to establish a separate colony on the southern continent." Elena sighed. "It's their choice. We can't force unity." The political tension might have continued indefinitely if not for the catastrophe that struck 3 months later. A massive earthquake, the first since their arrival, devastated the northeastern section of the settlement. Buildings collapsed, fires broke out, and several colonists were trapped beneath rubble. As rescue efforts began, unexpected heroes emerged. 5-year-old Aurora, sensing distress through her crystalline perception, led rescuers to buried survivors no scanning equipment could detect. Leaf, despite his young age, accelerated the growth of supportive root structures to stabilize collapsing walls. Marina, with her ability to move through water-filled spaces, retrieved medical supplies from flooded storage areas. Most surprisingly, the hybrid children demonstrated abilities neither parent species possessed alone. Aurora's touch could temporarily stabilize injured humans' vital signs. Leaf could accelerate healing in both organic and plant-based materials. Marina's scales generated bioelectric fields that neutralized waterborne contaminants. Working alongside the children, Ravi's Heritage Enclave members found themselves fighting shoulder to shoulder with the very hybrid families they had planned to leave behind. When Ravi himself was pulled from a collapsed structure by Aurora's glowing hands, something in the colony shifted permanently. In the aftermath, as the settlement began rebuilding, Ravi approached Commander Vasquez. "The southern expedition is postponed," he stated simply. "Perhaps indefinitely." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What changed your mind?" Ravi looked toward where the hybrid children were helping heal injured colonists. "I always believed our mission was to preserve humanity. Today I realized, perhaps this is how humanity advances." The distinctive rumble of atmospheric entry echoed across what was now called Harmony City. A decade after the crash of the Artemis, the settlement had evolved into a thriving metropolis of 5,000 souls, human, Lumini, Mersai, Sylvani, and every possible combination thereof. Commander Elena Vasquez, her hair now completely silver, stood on the observation platform with the Council of Elders, representatives from all species and hybrid communities. They watched as the Earth vessel Orion descended through the clouds, its pristine hull gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. "After all this time," murmured Kai, now the chief medical officer. The crystalline patterns in his skin had spread over the years, giving him an otherworldly appearance. "Earth finally found us. The question," replied Alejandro, "is whether they're prepared for what they'll find." The landing was precise and controlled, nothing like their own desperate crash a decade earlier. As the dust settled, a delegation of uniformly dressed humans emerged from the ship, faces fixed in expressions of professional neutrality that barely masked their shock as they surveyed the waiting crowd. Admiral James Pearson, commander of the Earth Rescue Mission, approached with careful steps. "Commander Vasquez? We've been searching for the Artemis for years. We detected your emergency beacon 6 months ago." Elena stepped forward, flanked by representatives of each species. "Admiral. Welcome to Novo. We have much to share with you." The Admiral's eyes widened as he took in Elena's escort, particularly Ixora, whose crystalline form now bore distinct human characteristics, and Aurora, the 10-year-old daughter of human and Lumini parents who glowed with inner light. "Commander," he whispered, "what happened here?" "Survival," Elena answered simply. "Then adaptation. Then growth." The following days were tense as the Earth delegation toured Harmony City. They marveled at the integrated technologies, crystalline power generators developed by human Lumini engineers, living architecture that combined Sylvani growth patterns with human design principles, and underwater habitation zones created through Mersai-human collaboration. But it was the hybrid families that caused the most consternation. Admiral Pearson and his scientific team observed with poorly concealed discomfort as children like Aurora demonstrated abilities no pure human could possess. "This violates every protocol for extraterrestrial contact," Dr. Emily Rhodes, the mission's xenobiologist, argued during a private meeting with Elena. "Genetic integrity protocols explicitly forbid biological integration with alien species." "Those protocols were written by people who never faced our situation," Elena countered. "We didn't have the luxury of maintaining artificial boundaries when our survival depended on cooperation." Admiral Pearson cleared his throat. "Commander Vasquez, our mission is to rescue the survivors of the Artemis. We have orders to evacuate all remaining human personnel." Silence fell across the council chamber. Finally, Kai spoke, his voice carrying subtle harmonic undertones. And how do you define human in this context, Admiral? The Admiral gestured uncomfortably at Kai's crystalline-patterned skin. That's precisely the issue, Doctor. Many of you have undergone changes that place you beyond standard human genetic parameters. Alejandro leaned forward. Are you suggesting that my daughter isn't human enough to qualify for rescue? Or that my son belongs to no world at all, added Naomi, the bark-like patterns on her skin darkening with emotion as she thought of Leaf. The Earth delegation shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Rhodes consulted her data pad. We've identified approximately 120 colonists who maintain standard human genetic profiles. Those individuals clearly qualify for evacuation. And the rest? Elena pressed. Admiral Pearson's expression hardened. They would require evaluation. Quarantine. Study. You mean experimentation, Kai translated flatly. The meeting ended in deadlock, with the Earth delegation returning to their ship to consider options. That evening, the Council of Elders convened an emergency session with representatives from all community segments. They intend to divide us, Elena explained. Take those they consider pure human back to Earth, and either abandon or study the rest. Even if we wanted to leave, Naomi pointed out, many of us couldn't survive in Earth's environment anymore. My body partially depends on photosynthesis now. Throughout the chamber, bonded pairs held hands or touched equivalents, hybrid children gathered close to their parents, fear evident in their expressions, some glowing, some rustling, some with scales shimmering in distress. Aurora, now recognized as a gifted mediator despite her young age, stepped into the center of the chamber. We should invite them to understand, not just observe. 3 days later, Admiral Pearson and his team were invited to a ceremony unlike any in human history. The event began in the central plaza but soon moved through every environment of Harmony City, the crystalline spires, the living forest, the underwater domes. At each location, the Earth visitors witnessed not a performance but an invitation. Hybrid families demonstrated their daily lives, their unique abilities, and most importantly, their connections. Children like Aurora guided the visitors, explaining how their dual heritage allowed them to bridge worlds in ways neither parent species could alone. In the evening, the celebration culminated with an offering, a ritual sharing of experiences. Volunteers from the hybrid community offered to temporarily link consciousness with the Earth delegates, sharing not just thoughts but sensations, emotions, and perspectives. You ask if we are still human, Aurora explained to the Admiral, her young voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. We invite you to feel the answer rather than analyze it. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Rhodes was the first to volunteer. Guided by Kai and Ixora, she experienced a brief mental connection with Aurora. When it ended, tears streamed down the scientist's face. Admiral, she whispered, they haven't lost their humanity. They've expanded it. One by one, other members of the Earth delegation participated, returning with similar revelations. By morning, Admiral Pearson faced a transformed situation, his own team advocating for the recognition of Harmony City not as a failed colony in need of rescue, but as a new branch of human evolution worthy of alliance. 1 month later, as the Orion prepared for departure, a historic document was signed, the Stellar Covenant. It recognized Harmony City as a sovereign entity, neither an Earth colony nor an alien world, but humanity's first true interstellar civilization. Only 23 colonists chose to return to Earth, mostly elderly who wished to see their homeworld once more before the end of their lives. The rest remained, committed to the future they had built. As the Earth ship lifted off, Elena stood with the Council of Elders, Kai and Ixora, Naomi and Thorn, Alejandro and Naya, and a dozen others representing the full spectrum of their integrated community. Do you think Earth is ready for what their delegation will tell them? Alejandro asked, holding Marina on his shoulders so she could watch the ship's ascent. Elena smiled, watching Aurora and the other hybrid children waving goodbye to the departing vessel. Ready or not, the universe just got smaller. And humanity just got larger. Above them, the stars emerged as dusk fell, the same stars that had once seemed so hostile when the Artemis crashed. Now they represented not isolation, but possibility. Harmony City stood as living proof that the future of humanity lay not in preserving what they had been, but in embracing what they could become together. As if reading her thoughts, Aurora's voice rose in the gathering darkness, her words carrying the harmonics of her dual heritage, not the end of one story, but the beginning of many.